Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another video. Now last time we focused on part number 3, which was improving on the range of motion in the quads, and especially trying to allow us to get that heel to touch the bottom when we go into that deep part of the squat. This time we're going to focus on the final part of the ATG squat method, which is the abduction of the hips. Now the reason why hip abduction is important is when you go into your squat, and especially when you get to the deeper ranges, pulling the knees apart allows us to engage the glute muscles, and especially when we're going back up into the concentric part of the movement. So for this reason, we want to really try and improve on that hip abduction. Now the second reason is if you're someone that's got a naturally posterior pelvic tilt, i.e. a tail tuck where the bottom tucks under, when we go into the squat, the bottom will start to tuck under a lot sooner. So if you're someone that has that or knows someone that has that, you'll notice that those people will be the ones that struggle to gain size in their legs. In comparison, if you look at people that have got a naturally anterior pelvic tilt, those people you'll notice will have much bigger development in the lower body, i.e. quads, hamstrings, and especially glutes. So glute engagement is very important for that low part of the squat, especially if you're loading it with a weight. This is why I think if you can improve the range of motion in your hips, you will have more access to muscles around the hips and especially the lower body, hence allowing you to develop more muscles around the legs. Alright, so the primary exercise I want to focus on today for that hip abduction movement is called the hanging squat. But before we get into the hanging squat, we're going to warm the muscles up around the hips to help us sink deeper into that hip abduction. So we're going to do an exercise called the side-to-side sumo squat. So the first thing I want you to do is bring your feet together. We're going to turn the heels out once, then the toes out, then the heels out again, and then the toes out again. So this is going to be our primary position for this exercise. If you're a bit more flexible, we can go a little wider with the legs as well. Next, we're going to place our hands on our knees or the thighs, depending on what's more comfortable. And then we're going to pull the knees apart to allow us to sink down into that sumo squat or horse stance position. The deeper you go with the hips, the stronger you're going to feel this. And then when you get to that lowest point, I want you to try and take all the weight into the hands. This is the most important thing about this exercise, that you take all the weight into the hands. This way the hip stays more relaxed and you've got more control with your hands. The goal here is to try and get the knees in line with the hips in that abduction movement. But if you're new to this exercise, don't worry too much about it if the knees are going slightly forward. The first part of the movement is just a side-to-side rock. We can either do this for repetitions. I try and aim for anything between 20 to 30 repetitions, or you can try and put a timer on for 1 minute to 90 seconds and keep continuously rocking side to side. The more the hips start to warm up, the more you can sink the hips down towards the ground. And it's just a gentle rock side to side. Good, once we're done with that, we're going to come back up, bring the legs together, shake the legs off, take about 1 minute to 2 minutes rest, and then we're going to go into the next part of this exercise. We're going to sink back into the same position and we're going to do a little PNF contraction. So the contraction here is you pull the knees as wide as possible using the glutes. So we're not using the hands to push the knees out, but we're using the glute muscles at the back to try and squeeze the knees wider. Hold that for 5 seconds, relax the contraction, take a deep breath in, and then as you exhale, see if you can sink the hip down a little lower. And then from here, we can do a couple of reps side to side to help bring the hips down a little lower. Good. Feel free to repeat that contraction again and then pull yourself out, shake the legs off, and we're going to go into the second part of the movement. Okay, for the second part, we go back into that sumo squat position. And then instead of keeping the hands on top of the knees, we're going to bring the forearms on the inner part of the thighs. So this is going to allow us to go a little bit deeper into that hip abduction since we're using our forearms to gently push the knees a little wider. Again, we're going to go into that side-to-side rock. Good, once you're done with that, we're going to go into the second PNF contraction. This time, we're going to use our arms to push the knees wider. So we're pushing the knees back towards us. Hold that for 5 seconds, relax it, take a deep breath in, and then as you exhale, see if you can sink down deeper. Again, you want to try and relax the hip and take all of the weight into the forearms. Nice, once you finish with that, pull yourself out. Again, give the legs a shake, and we're done with that one. Now here's a couple of tips for this exercise. The first one is we don't need to have the feet turned out when we're performing this sumo squat side-to-side movement. Reason being that balancing will probably be an issue for a lot of people. So the ideal position is around 45 degrees with the feet, so then that way we feel more stable and balanced when we're performing the movement. The second tip is you can do this exercise with your bottom and your back being supported by the wall, especially if you've really got tight hips and your knees are caving forward when you go down into that sumo squat. Now, the use of the wall allows us to sink a lot deeper into the exercise, plus by pushing the bottom against the wall, it allows you to bring your upper body more upright. The knees may come a little further forward for more comfort as well. Okay, so for the hanging squat, we're going to position ourselves on an elevated surface. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to use a plyometric box. Feel free to use a table or something that's stable enough and high enough so you can hang off it. So the first thing you're going to do is grab yourself a kettlebell or a dumbbell. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to use 8 kg. And then you're going to step up onto the box. Next, we're going to come to the edge of the box. You want to make sure your toes are not right off the edge, just slightly behind. And then depending on the flexibility of your ankles, you want to see if you can go down into a squat without the heels coming off the box. If your heels do start to rise, feel free to either turn the heels out a bit more or go a little wider on your stance. And that will probably make it a little easier to keep the heels down. If that doesn't work and you're still struggling with balance, feel free to place a yoga block or a wedge underneath the heels to stop you from going so much into that dorsiflexion movement. Next, we're going to pull the knees wider and allow the weight to pull you down towards the ground. And this is going to be the starting position of that elevated squat. Straight away, you're going to feel a stretch in the iliacus muscle in the hip, plus you'll probably feel a really deep stretch right across the lower back muscles as well. For the first movement, we're just going to go up and down with the kettlebell. So you rock your weight into the heels and then rock the weight back into the toes and see if you can pull yourself down lower. You're going to aim for anything between 8 to 10 repetitions depending on the weight you're lifting. So the key here is to make sure that you're pulling the knees wider as you bring yourself down towards the ground with the kettlebell. Good, once you've done that, you can take a quick break and then we're going to go into movement number 2. So for the second movement, we're going to pull ourselves back into position and then we're just going to rock the weight side to side. So I'm rocking my weight from one foot to the other foot. I'm not using my arms as a pendulum, but just using the shift of weight from one foot to the other foot to allow the arms to rock the kettlebell side to side. Again, anything between 8 to 10 repetitions is perfect. Pull yourself out. And then for the final movement, we're going to hold the kettlebell with one arm. So we're going to pull ourselves down with that arm, and then from here, we're going to use the opposite arm to try and turn our chest up towards the ceiling and point our arm towards the ceiling. Hold that for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then bring the arm back down towards the ground. As I'm doing this movement, my focus is to try and sink the weight down towards the ground. And again, it's just 8 to 10 repetitions of this exercise. Once you've done that, you're going to switch sides and do the same thing on the other side. Now we want to go with a low to intermediate weight when we're performing this exercise, but if you do go with a slightly heavier weight, feel free to reduce the volume when you're performing this exercise. So instead of doing 8 to 10 repetitions, maybe reduce them down to 5 to 8. Alright, so that was it for the last movement in the ATG squat series. Try these exercises out and you'll see a massive difference in the depth and the form of your ATG squat. Let me know how they go for you, and hopefully starting from next week, we will go into a brand new series focusing on a new set of movements and muscles. I'll see you in the next one. Done.